Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Prism of Perspective Podcast. Today, I'm really excited to share the story of someone who has overcome tremendous challenges, and that's Ken Kunken. And Ken broke his neck when playing football for Cornell University back in 1970, and it left him almost totally paralyzed from the shoulders down. After a lengthy hospitalization, Ken returned to Cornell, where he completed his undergraduate degree in engineering. He then earned a Master's of Arts degree at Cornell in education, as well as a Master's of Education degree at Columbia University in psychology. Ken became a nationally certified rehabilitation counselor, and he worked for more than 2 years at Abilities Inc., where he provided vocational and placement counseling to severely disabled individuals. Still wanted to accomplish more, so he enrolled at Hofstra University School of Law, and then he worked for more than 40 years as a Nassau County Assistant District Attorney, where he became the Deputy Bureau Chief. Ken is married and the father of triplet boys. He's also the author of I Dream of Things That Never Were, the Ken Kunken story. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me as a guest.
Oh, my pleasure. Quite a story. And as our people that listen and watch with consistency know, what we like to do is look at people who have met their life and met the challenges that have come at them and explore that journey through the prism of perspective, looking at how beliefs that they may have had or that came upon impacted the way they saw the world, how they use different habits, whether they be physical habits or psychological habits, to make sure that they were in a great position to generate energy so they could meet the challenges. And then also, how do they stay present, right? Because sometimes life throws stuff at us and it maybe has a tendency to initially trigger us, but we aren't really our best when that's so. And so how do they meet that challenge? And so what I want to do is kind of take you back. Obviously, a really big pivot for you was having this spinal cord injury in 1970. At the time, I think you were a sophomore in college and, pursuing an engineering degree, healthy, vital, doing a lot of things. And then all of a sudden you had an event that just changed the course of your world. Tell me a little bit about what you were feeling prior to that time. And then, what happened with the accident for you.
Okay. It was actually right at the beginning of my junior year at
Junior year.
Cornell.
Okay. All right.
And I was playing on their lightweight football team.
Mm-hmm.
And I tackled the ball carrier on a kickoff. And once I tackled the ball carrier, I broke my neck and severely damaged my spinal cord. And as a result, I'm almost totally paralyzed. I have just a little bit of movement in my left arm and nothing on the right side of my body.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent the next 9 months and 20 days in various hospitals and rehabilitation centers. And while I injured my neck and not my head, I was really surprised at how I was treated by virtually everybody after my injury, including the medical personnel who should have known better.
Tell me what you mean by that.
Well, they used to talk to other people about me as if I wasn't even in the room or couldn't speak for myself. They treated me as if I had an intellectual disability, even though my disability was purely physical. And they seemed to think that the best I would now ever be able to do would be to someday sell magazine subscriptions over the telephone. Now, here I was, a junior at Cornell University, one of the most prestigious engineering colleges in the world, pursuing my major. And as a result of my physical injury, I was treated as if I didn't have a brain in my head.
Right. It's fortunate that we've made a lot of progress as it relates to how we see different disabilities and have a different understanding. But that was at a different time. And I understand from reading in your book that at the time, Cornell really didn't, and really probably nowhere had handicap facilities, ramps, access, curb cuts. And so you decide to go back to school, but certainly it's much more challenging than it might be even for someone today with the same physical predicament, right?
It sure was. I mean, I had the added misfortune of being injured 20 years before the Americans with Disabilities Act took effect.
Mm.
So very few facilities were actually wheelchair accessible. And Cornell was particularly inaccessible. I mean, Cornell's located in upstate Ithaca, New York. And in addition to its long, cold, snowy winters, Cornell's on a very hilly terrain. And just about every one of its buildings had steps in front of it. And there was not one ramp or curb cut on the entire campus. And just to tell you a little bit more about that, one of the classes, which I took, which met 3 times a week, was located in a building that had 16 steps in front of it. And my dorm was in a building that had 10 steps just to get in. So on my first day of classes, I had to be either pulled up or bounced down close to 100 steps just to attend my first day.
Wow. Wow. And at the time, I don't know, what were mechanized wheelchairs like? What was available for you at that time? Is it
Well, they certainly weren't developed the way they are today, but I couldn't use my electric wheelchair up there because it couldn't go up and down steps.
right?
So I had to be in a manual wheelchair and be pushed everywhere I went, which made it even more difficult for me.
Wow, I would imagine. Yeah, I've been to the campus at Ithaca. It's gorgeous, but I guess it's probably not as gorgeous when you're thinking about it from the perspective of how do I get around in this wheelchair up these. I remember one time my cousin went to Ithaca, and I had a good friend that went to Cornell, and I ran from one campus to the other, and you like run down these hills and you run up the other hill, and the whole thing was just descending and ascending hills. So I can imagine in your situation that was an additional challenge. But congratulations to you for your fortitude to decide that you were going to continue to push on, and you got your engineering degree, and then you decided to make a pivot and look at education and psychology. What made that move? What came up for you there that was motivated in that way?
Well, when I was at Cornell, I took an elective in psychology. And my professor at the time, Dr. James Moss, took an interest in me and encouraged me to pursue a career in psychology and to do counseling because he felt that I could have a very positive impact on others based upon what I've been experiencing and what
Mhm.
I've gone through. So, through his encouragement, I decided to pursue a career in counseling. And that's when I earned my degree at Cornell in counseling and student personnel administration. And then to increase my counseling credentials, I went to Columbia University where I earned my second master's degree. This one was in psychological counseling and rehabilitation. And I might add that then I went to look for a job and no one would hire me.
Really?
This was in the mid 70s. And here I was. I had 2 degrees from Cornell, one from Columbia,
Right.
3 prestigious Ivy League degrees, 2 master's degrees, and everyone felt I was just too disabled to work.
Right. That's amazing.
Finally, I found one organization willing to give me the opportunity to show what I could do. And that's an organization on Long Island in New York called Abilities Incorporated, which was part of what's now called the Viscardi Center, named
Okay.
after its founder, Dr. Henry Viscardi Jr.
And so at that with that company, that corporation that you worked with, you did a lot of vocational and placement counseling for people that might have had disabilities somewhat similar to your own. So you really had that experience of not only having the counseling and the rehabilitation educational background, but you also had a real experience of how difficult it is to get placed when you have these
Right.
disabilities as well.
Everybody that I was counseling had a disability. As it turned out, I actually was more severely limited than all of the people that I was counseling, but it was a very rewarding experience. I learned a lot, and it did a lot for my self esteem and my feelings of self worth and self confidence.
Right. Take me back to what was going on for you, because I so many people would not have chosen to continue their education, face the challenges that you faced. And so when I think about how we engage the world, one of the premises of the Prism of Perspective is that our beliefs, our expectations play a huge role in filtering out information that comes at us and amplifying information that aligns with our beliefs. And so what were some of the beliefs you had that gave you that resilience, and where do you think that came from?
Oh, it definitely came from my family. I mean, they believed that I still had a lot to offer. And while I did have some severe physical limitations, mentally, I did not have any
Right.
challenges. So they encouraged me to go back to school and make the most of my mental abilities. So my feeling was, well, I should go back to Cornell, where, not only was I comfortable there, but I had a lot of friends, whether it be in my fraternity or on the football team,
Right.
and to try and pursue a career and pick up right where I had left off.
Right.
So I went back, completed my degree in industrial engineering. But again, this was well before they had laptop computers. And industrial engineering just didn't seem like a viable field for me when I went back. And I realized that what I really wanted to do was to pursue a career in counseling, where I
Right.
could deal with people one on one and try and help others deal with problems they were facing in their lives. So
Right.
that's why I stayed at Cornell and obtained my master's degree there.
So what were the things that you were able to do that have back at that time enabled you to be to optimize whatever physical gifts you had remaining? What were some of the things that you engaged in? Because a lot of times when people have severe paralysis, the rest of the body doesn't survive very well. What were some of the things that you did that you think might have contributed to you having a different outcome?
Well, I was fortunate that I always had a good memory before I was injured, but after I was injured, I worked hard to improve it.
Okay.
And I had to work really hard to do that because I had to rely a lot on my memory since I was not able to take notes.
Right.
So I worked hard to do that. But I was very surprised at how many people were coming up to me and indicating that they were motivated and inspired by what I was doing with my life.
Right.
And, they were encouraging me to get out and talk more before groups and organizations on what I was doing. And that seemed very foreign to me. I mean, I believe before I was hurt, I was a bit of an introvert.
Mm.
I'd be the person that would sit in the very back row of every lecture and not raise my hand and hope the professor would never call on me. And suddenly here I was, out of necessity, sitting in front of the front row, usually, and finding that people were asking me to speak to their groups and organizations.
So I want to sit with that for a second, and maybe think through this with you. Maybe you've probably done a lot of thinking about it. But one of the ways I think about cognitive capabilities is very similar to the way I think about physical capabilities. And I love exercise. So, but the way I define exercise is exercise when you place a demand against the function of a system or a structure that challenges its capacity and forces adaptation, right? You can exercise tons of different ways. And often we just think about that as a physical thing. But what I think I heard you saying is you were essentially doing a lot of mental exercise, recognizing that you were going to have to rely even more on your brain, on your capability to remember, et cetera, as you moved out into the world. Did you see it as kind of an exercise, or how did you perceive that?
I did. And I knew that the one thing that I could exercise was my mind. And
Right.
I worked really hard on trying to improve it, my ability to concentrate, my ability to retain information, to try and think and speak before groups and organizations without notes in front of me. And
Right.
I worked hard, very hard, to try and develop that capability.
Right. Which clearly you did. Right. So I know that you worked as the vocational and rehabilitation counselor for a couple of years, and then you went back to school. at Hofstra to pursue a law degree. Tell me a little more about what was motivating that. It sounds like you really were enjoying and feeling um, effective and also really well suited in the counseling work that you were doing. What caused you to say, you know what, I want to do something different?
It's a good question. I loved the work I was doing at the center and found it very rewarding. And I believe I grew a lot as a person and as a professional. And my duties there kept expanding. And one of the things the center had me do was speak before groups and organizations concerning non discrimination and affirmative action for people with disabilities.
Mm.
And often after my talks, I would be asked questions. And while I would do my best to respond appropriately, I was always careful to caution the questioners they should really consult with a lawyer about their concerns.
Okay.
I guess it didn't take long before I started to think, there's no reason why I couldn't become that lawyer.
Right. Right.
In addition, I had an older brother who was a lawyer at the time. He was practicing criminal law, and I used to watch him in court as well and say it looked like something I could do and looked interesting. So I decided there was still more I wanted to accomplish, and I left the center to go to law school.
And I read in your story that that originally when you were speaking with your brother about this, the idea was at some level thinking about, well, what are based on some of the physical limitations, what's really the best suited for you. And, his original thoughts were, something that's really just going to challenge your mind, like tax law or something along those lines. But your real interest after, I guess, watching him was like, I kind of want to go into that courtroom, right? Is that
That's
an accurate?
exactly it. I love the challenge of being in the courtroom, being in front of people, and arguing a case before a judge and a jury. So I did an internship, the Nassau County District Attorney's Office, fell in love with the job, and I found a new way that I could now help people and serve the community as a whole. And I knew I wanted to devote my life to helping others in public service, and working as an assistant district attorney now seemed like the perfect way for me to do that.
Oh, okay. And so again, one of the challenges that arose, I'm not an attorney, but I've watched enough of them on TV to pretend I know what I'm talking about, right? So you see, like, oh, I'm flipping through the yellow pad and I got well, you're not flipping through any yellow pads. You, as you said, were really having to rely in this area, I am assuming as much like in other areas of your life, on a very strong memory. Tell me a little more about that, because that seems like the intricacies of, legal doctrine, et cetera, would be so specific, and the recitation of different things that you're referencing seems, quite the climb. How did you experience that?
Yeah. Well, I'd read over the file over and over again to make sure I could remember every part of it. And I tried to do my best to relax and use the skills I acquired as a vocational rehabilitation counselor to listen to people, to think constructively, and try and decide the best way of moving forward. I know a lot of times when I go before a jury afterwards, they would remark that I maintained great eye contact my whole time. Part of that reason was I didn't have notes to look down to or to read. I was doing it mostly from memory and just, trying to think on my feet, so to speak, about how to proceed. And I felt I learned a lot in my job as vocational rehabilitation counselor that helped me in dealing with people in general and handling the cases in the district attorney's office.
That's so fascinating. And I want to touch on something that you said and kind of bring in the Prism of Perspective for a moment. So one of the things that I heard you say is that you recognize that you really needed to stay present at some level. You didn't use those words, right? But you had to stay present and really listening, and then not reacting, but responding, right? So taking the space, giving yourself that time that would allow you to continue to access your best thinking, right? One of the challenges so many people bring to themselves, or, don't have the skills to do, is to stay present in that moment. And so they end up being so reactive and fear-based. And when we're fear-based, we actually shut down our abilities to access the executive functions that are so necessary for that type of work. So was it something you were really thinking through? Like, in order to be at my best, I have to absolutely make sure that I'm staying calm and present in this moment? Or was it something that it was just, tell me a little more about how that came about for you?
It was very much what you said. What would happen is a lot of assistant district attorneys would write out all their questions ahead of time, right? And then they would ask, question number one and question number two. And they were so focused on the next question, they often didn't listen to the response they were getting.
Right.
And later, when I became a supervisor, that really hit home even more so because I'd be watching from the back of the courtroom and I'd hear and see the assistant district attorney ask a question. The witness would give it an answer that would be a perfect way to follow up on that
Right.
answer. And the assistant district attorney would just go on to the next question they had written out.
Right.
And I learned early on, you really have to listen to the response you're getting and then frame your next question. And I think that really helped me a lot in my career as an assistant DA.
And I would imagine it helped you a lot in your life, right? I mean, one of the things
Very much
that,
so.
being
Very much so.
in any relationship, in any situation where we're seeking to have impact and influence, being present and actually being engaged in dialogue rather than, intermittent monologues that are often, the what shows up instead of being in dialogue. We don't really get anywhere. We're so many times attached to, the belief that we brought in, right? One of the ideas of your beliefs is that the beliefs you have are absolutely going to filter what you see, but you also want to be taking that information in and then being able to reform, not saying, hey, this is a set of beliefs I walked in with and I'm gonna go out with them, right? You have to be thinking about, like, is there new information here that has me seeing this differently? Then being present for your life is one of the ways staying pliable with our beliefs is so vital.
Absolutely. You worded it perfectly.
Yeah. So when you became an attorney and then eventually the bureau chief, what is that transition? I'm not as from bureau chief. It seems as if you're running a division of the Nassau County Bar Association or State's Attorney's Office, but I'm not really sure how. So what exactly does that mean, and what kind of work was that?
Okay. Well, I became a deputy bureau chief.
Oh, okay.
So I was helping supervise more than 25 other assistant district attorneys. So it was a very big transition to make because as an assistant DA, you're given a very heavy caseload of individual cases that you work hard to work up to be able to handle and prosecute them. But what you basically focus in is what legal issues you would need to be adept at in handling with your respective cases.
Right.
Now, as a deputy bureau chief, I was faced with handling legal issues coming from 25 other assistant district attorneys that, I hadn't had the time to research ahead of time often, or weren't thinking about until suddenly I was asked the question, and would have to do my best to either research the law or find a way of handling the questions appropriately. And it also meant a lot of just dealing with individual people. I
Right.
mean, the people came, up to me with their own individual backgrounds, and some handled pressure better than other people did. Some handled criticism better than other individuals did. And you had to really learn a lot about just how to deal with people on an individual basis, as well as the demands of the office.
How do you feel your education and experience and counseling played a role in your ability to do that work?
Played
As
a major role. That helped me a lot. I don't know how I would have functioned as effectively as an assistant DA and as a supervisor had I not had that background.
And when you're supervising, were you still in the cases? Were you sitting second chair or whatever in those situations, or are you just guiding?
Sometimes I was sitting a second chair at the table with the prosecutor. Other times I'd be sitting in the back of the courtroom and then giving feedback during breaks or at the end of each day to try and help guide the prosecutor.
but you're almost always in the courtroom while the person that you're supervising is in a trial.
Not always, because since I was helping supervise,
Right. That I was thinking it would be
about
challenging. Right.
25 other assistants, most of the time I'd be in the office dealing with one issue or another.
Right.
So when I had the opportunity to go to court, that was a welcome opportunity so I could see firsthand what was going on in court. But a lot of it, I would have to do at the end of each day,
Right.
when the ADAs would come back to me and tell me what happened.
Right. Kind of give them like halftime ideas, like here's what we learned about the offense, right? That's how we have to change this a little bit. Um, so you did that work, and I believe I saw that you were in that work for 40 years.
Right. I worked there full time for close to 34 years. And then when I stopped working full time, I continued to work part time for another 8 years. And it was actually last year that I actually retired full time from the job.
So I'm going to dive back into, yeah, again, one of the areas that I look at from exercise. The reason I like, that I think exercise is so important is it really allows us to expand our health span, right? What we're able to do. And one of the things I think that we do in a really silly way in this society is accelerate retirement. And so many people walk off the playing field when they really have a ton to offer. And what the research shows is if they were to continue to offer it, their lives and probably the lives of a lot of other people they could contribute to would be enhanced. How did, because I'm doing the math on it, right? So you're had your injury, you did this other work, you went back to law school. So you worked into your 70s, right?
Right.
And and again, that you had some other circumstances you had to overcome that many don't. What was your thinking about that as far as the aging and
I think, well, certainly it was challenging, but I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed the intellectual stimulation, and I enjoyed the fact that now I was in a position to help others. So I enjoyed that very much. Of course, one of my concerns, though, was to make sure my family would be provided for after I retired. And in working at the district attorney's office, when you work a certain number of years, you earn a pension for when you retire. And I was concerned that if for any reason I died before I retired, the payout that my wife and children would receive wouldn't have been as much as if I retired early and made other arrangements for
really?
what type of pension. Well, that's the way I had figured it. There are different ways that you could choose what type of pension you would get, but I thought this was the best way of assuring my family would be taken care of, if for any reason I died while I was still working.
So, so obviously you've made reference to your family a little bit. I know that you were married after becoming an attorney. So tell us a little bit about that, because again, that's often a challenging situation for someone with the physical disabilities that you have, right? It's a tough thing. You don't like go on to match.com and that's not your first thing that you're advertising. Um, Tell me about how that worked for you. Obviously, you've been happily married and raised wonderful
Right.
children and so many different
Yeah.
elements, but getting into it must have been something that maybe brought some fear for you. I don't know.
Oh, it sure did. Following my injury, I knew that I was 20 years old. That was just too soon to give up on life. And I thought and believed that what I really wanted to do was pick up my life just where it had been before my injury. And I believe the importance of participating and getting out and engaging in different activities and meeting and engaging with different people. And one of those activities was dating. Like many men, I wanted to have a relationship with the perfect woman for me.
Yep.
And as you might expect, dating when you're a quadriplegic and trying to impress a woman when you're almost totally paralyzed poses its own unique set of challenges. So it took me a while. In fact, I was almost 50 when I met the perfect woman for me. Her name is Anna. She's sitting just to my right, just
Yep.
off camera right now. And Anna and I just seem to hit it off. And despite the fact that we have so many differences, I guess opposites really do attract, since, you know, Anna is 19 years younger than I am. Anna was born and raised in Poland, where I've spent almost my entire life on Long Island. Anna is Catholic and I am Jewish. Anna's over 6 feet tall and I'm just under 5'8". And Anna's in exceptional physical conditions and works out every single day. And I'm, well, almost totally paralyzed.
Right.
And yet it just seemed like a match made in heaven.
Oh, that's awesome.
Um,
What a great
there was
story.
just a certain magic and chemistry between us that I just can't put into words. And when we decided to get married, Anna indicated that she wanted to have my baby. Now, this really seemed impossible. At the time, I had been paralyzed for more than 30 years,
Right.
and I was already in my 50s. But we looked into various options, including in vitro fertilization, and we're excited to learn it still might be possible for someone in my condition to father a child. So we pursued it, and on January 24th, 2005, I was present in the delivery room
Oh, that's so great.
when my wife gave birth to triplets.
Wow. That's
We have
incredible.
triplet sons. They're now 20 years old.
Yep.
Um, they're all sophomores at 3 separate colleges in upstate New York.
Yep.
And they are just the love of my life and just keep me excited and going each and every day. And I might add that one of the reasons why I retired when I did was to spend more time with my boys as they were growing up. It
Right.
gave me more time to be home with them and try and help shape their values and their character and help them become the best individuals they could be.
Right. I love that. So what I'd like to do now is look at it from where you sit today. And, as we talk about beliefs, one of the strongest areas of beliefs as I see is really what you believe to be true about yourself. We've talked a bit about your story, and then we also want to look at like what's your purpose from this moment forward? What are the values that you want to express? And what are the gifts that you want to continue to contribute to the world? So let's start
Okay.
off with where you sit today and you look into the future. How would you define your life purpose moving forward?
My life purpose moving forward is to help others, to help as many people as I can. I couldn't have done any of the things I did in my life without all the help, encouragement, and support I received from my family and my friends.
Mm,
And as a result, I want to do everything I can to pay that back and to help as many people as I can. And I find that whenever I have the opportunity to help others, it makes me feel better about myself as well.
I think that's such an important point and part of why I think this retirement thing, you know, not that you can't retire and then find other things where you add value, but a lot of times people walk away from a thing where they felt like they were making a lot of contribution and purpose, and they move into a lot of leisure that doesn't have as much purpose for them. Now, there's plenty of ways to leave whatever work you're doing and go find something else and have a good bit of leisure. I'm not at all saying that shouldn't be part of it. But if we leave the contribution part off, then like you said, it makes you feel great, right? I mean, even psychologically or neuropsychologically, right? The neurochemistry that goes on in the brain when you're being a contribution is that those a lot of those feel good neurochemicals that are so important for us to stay sharp and to really feel engaged in our lives. And so it's great that, you said, yes, I retired a year ago, but I'm still filled with purpose and I want to be the greatest contribution that I can be. And also just expressed incredible gratitude, which is another one of the really key elements about how you build a great life. So you have the purpose and contribution that's so important to you, then express understanding that, yeah, I have some challenges, but I have I've lived an amazing life, right? It sounds like you've lived a pretty amazing life and you currently continue to live a life of love and connection and support. And um, that's incredible. What are the values? You talked a little bit about really wanting to continue to help shape your boys' values moving forward. What are the most important values that the way I like to kind of throw this out there is like if you were God and you were to be, having a set of values that you wanted to have expressed out in the world, what would be the ones that would be primary for you?
I guess we go back to the golden rule: do unto others as you would like them to do unto you. I mean, there's an awful lot you can do to help others
Hmm.
and to make the world a better place by doing so.
Right.
And we all face challenges during our lives. Some challenges are obviously bigger than others, but it's how we handle those challenges, how we face them, that will make the difference between someone who is good and someone who is great. And I believe we all have that innate ability to face challenges and handle difficult situations. And I believe we also have an inner strength that most people don't have to draw upon, but when they do, they believe they can actually tackle almost insurmountable odds.
Right.
And I want my children to know that no matter what adversity they may face in their lives, they have it within them to face their challenges, overcome them, and not only make something from their lives, but help others at the same time as well.
So I want to ask a question that popped into my head, and I'm not trying to get political here, but as someone who has disabilities and also a legal background, and that you saw the impact, I'm assuming that when the Disabilities Act did go into effect 20 years after your accident, that it made your life easier. And also, I would assume that, really ensuring that people have the opportunity to use their skills, gifts, and talents, regardless of, you know, what might be discriminatory, right? I'm going to not bring this person in. What are your thoughts about some of the things that are going on right now with like DEI? And is that a concern? Do you see that? What's your perspective as someone who has really lived with some of the benefits that were enabled because they started to allow more inclusion?
It's very much a concern. When you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think back to so many personal aspects in my life that I believe are relevant when you talk about that. One of them that comes to mind immediately is in the district attorney's office. When we leave the job, they would have you go through an exit interview where you talk to somebody in the personnel department about what you like best about the job and what you thought could be improved. And I'm proud to say that on a number of occasions, assistant district attorneys have indicated the best part of their job was meeting, getting to know, and working with me.
Right.
Now, I don't say that to boast or brag. I know what they were referring to
Right.
was meeting, working with, and spending time with someone with a significant disability. Because unless they had the opportunity to do that, say with a close relative, most people never have that opportunity to
Right.
spend time with somebody who is that much different than they are.
Right. And
Diversity.
right.
And they found it has helped them develop as a person. It's helped make them more resilient, and it's motivated and inspired them to do more with their lives. And I might add that when I retired from the district attorney's office, they actually named an award after me. It's the
Oh yeah.
only award they give out on an annual basis called the Kenneth J. Kunken Award. And it's given to the outstanding assistant district attorney each year who basically demonstrates my work ethic and my dedication to the office. I might also add that when I left my job in Abilities Incorporated, the Viscardi Center, 30 years after I left, they asked me to be a member of their board of directors
Oh,
because
that's
they
awesome.
felt that I had a lot to contribute. And
Right.
I take that to say, you know what? Diversity, equity, and inclusion has helped these organizations. It's helped the people working in those organizations. And I've tried to dedicate my life to encouraging other employers to hire people with disabilities. And those that have found it just makes good business sense to do so.
Right.
So it upsets me. It upsets me a great deal when I think people still question the merits of that when there's so much to be gained from everybody's perspective
Right.
by
Right.
pursuing diversity, equity, and inclusion in their offices.
Yeah, I agree. And are you familiar with Brene Brown at all?
No, I'm not.
She's a sociologist who does a lot of work on vulnerability and wholehearted living. But when she wrote a book, uh, um, she's great. She's got one of the most popular TED Talks, or two of the most popular TED Talks. You might enjoy her a lot. But one of the things she talks about is that it's hard to hate up close. And I think that that's one of the things that when there is diversity, that you get an opportunity to, for you, it was, meeting somebody that had a significant physical disability in a way that most people hadn't. But literally, for some people, it's meeting people of a different race or religion or perspective or sexuality or whatever it happens to be. And we often make up stories about people that are other than us. And unless we're actually in some way or another confronted with, oh, I guess that wasn't true, the story I had made up. And I think that, again, that's another thing. And again, I think the last piece is whenever anyone's like someone's a DEI hire, they the intention is to give someone an opportunity, right? If you don't have the opportunity, you can't demonstrate your capability. It's not to say this person doesn't have the capabilities of doing this job. It's just that I'm going to look and see how this person has capabilities or doesn't have capabilities to this job. And
Absolutely.
the tendency is for people to hire people that look like them and feel like them and grow up with them and that they knew and that they were in the same fraternity or whatever it happens to be, right? And I mean, and once there's a power structure in place that there's so much of a particular way of being, then even if we're not trying in any way, shape, or form to be discriminatory, just because we're more comfortable or we have more relationships or what, it's going to build. And so to me, it seems as if it's been a really essential piece. And not that there aren't places where it could be misused. Certainly there are. There's always things. But rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater, maybe we just figure out like, okay, how do we do this? How do we refine it in a way that really is the most effective moving forward?
I agree. You've worded it very well.
Yeah.
I
So,
agree. I might add that when I was first looking for my first job after getting my two master's degrees, I was even turned down when I offered to volunteer my services.
wow.
And here I had 3 degrees from Cornell,
Right.
from two from Cornell, one from Columbia. When I left my job as a rehab counselor, they not only hired a full-time counselor to replace me, they had to divide additional duties I was doing between two other employees. And
Right.
when I was working as a trial attorney in the district attorney's office, the number of trials, pretrial hearings, and grand jury presentations I did each year were always among the highest in my bureau. So I know one of people's concerns was if you hire somebody with a disability, will that increase the workload on the other employees?
Right.
Absolutely not. In my perspective, I was one of the hardest working people in the office.
Right.
Um, and I, you know, um, I think it's just important to look at the impact you have on others um, when you're given that opportunity, right?
Right.
And the people around me, have united in basically saying it has helped them do a
Right.
better job and be a better person.
Right. Well, I can imagine it has been. I have really loved our opportunity of getting to know one another a little bit here. Tell me if there's one other thing you really wanted people to know about your journey, either past or moving forward, what would be the really most important thing for you to share with our listeners?
Well, there's an awful lot people can do when you give them the opportunity to show you. And when you have these prejudgments and automatically assume somebody can't do something, either because of the way they look or the way they talk or any possible limitations they may have, your expectations can have a profound effect on what others eventually accomplish. Because
Right.
people's performance often rises and falls based upon what others expect of them. And
Right.
if you keep your expectations high, it'll enable others to accomplish more. And if you keep your expectations for yourself high, you'll do more as well with your own abilities. So
Yeah.
I think that's so important to recognize.
Yeah. I love that. And there's a couple things that I think about when you say that is, like you said, when you have high expectations. Stephen Covey wrote about leadership a good bit. And one of the things that he said that I would love about leadership, he says, leadership is the ability to see greatness in another and to communicate it to them so clearly that they can see it in themselves. And I think when think about, people are often have an insecurity around this thing or that thing, or they're growing and challenging and they're trying to take on something new. Being in the world and being that encourager and really taking the time to let somebody see the greatness that you do see in them. You're taking the time to say, here's what I really admire or think is great about you. And here's what I think that means as a possibility, that we can then speak that courage into them, and then they can begin to move on it. And then, of course, they go out into their world and they continue to ripple and have other effects. But that opportunity that we all have to look for greatness in others, look for what's right rather than what's wrong, has a really huge compounding effect. And I think that's a
Absolutely.
beautiful lesson that you've shared with us today.
Thank you.
So,
Absolutely.
so I really have enjoyed this very much. Thank you for taking the time out and sharing your wonderful story with us. I wish you a really joyful retirement, and I know that you'll continue to be an incredible contribution to others and continue to add your wonderful essence. And I'm so grateful that you shared that with us today. So thank
Thank
you.
you. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my story and what
Uh,
I found to be important.
yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it. You have a great day. We're
You
going to
too.
post everywhere that you're on. I know you have social media contacts. We can put the book in there. And so if you guys would like to learn more about Ken's story and about how he's continuing to engage the world, we'll have all of that information there for you in the show notes. Okay. Thanks again and have a great day.